Childcare workers of Reddit. What is worst case of helicopter parenting? My child can do no wrong you've ever seen. I had a boy who kept acting out in class. Things like talking to classmates while I was giving directions, giving strange answers, hitting the boys sitting next to him in the arm. I kept notes and informed our academy director about what was happening, and he was pulled aside after school a few times to talk about his behavior. One day, at the end of class, he reached across the table and forcefully flicked a girl in the forehead. She complained, and he cocked back his arm like he was going to punch her in response. I had him sit while I let everyone else leave and told him to stay seated while I discussed his behavior with the academy director. If nothing else, being the last one to go would be a sort of punishment. The director chewed him out, and apparently he told his mom about it because his mom came to the academy to say that her son was an angel, and I should be reprimanded for exaggerating or lying about the situation. Cue the director listing off all the crap her son had done over the past few weeks and telling her that her son was no longer welcome at the academy. Never saw him again after that. Comment? He's a great boss to have. About 9 years ago, there was a similar situation where a girl's mother assumed I was the problem and demanded he fire me. When he refused, after asking me about the situation and checking with the other students individually, who all confirmed she was a troublemaker, the mother threatened to call all her friends to have them pull their kids from our academy. Her plan backfired, though, as the director informed her that if we experienced any sudden drops in enrollment, he would make it a point to inform every other director in the city about her daughter and what a problem she was. Nice to work for someone who looks out for employees like that, and I appreciate that he checked with the other students to get a better picture of what happened. Story 2. While studying, I work in an after-school care. One day, a 9-year-old was showing everyone his lighter by trying to set the shirt he was wearing on fire. I obviously took the lighter off him. When his mother came to pick him up, I handed it to her and told her about him trying to set his shirt on fire. Turns out it was her lighter, so I had no right to confiscate it. And her son just wouldn't try to set his clothes in fire because he's not an idiot, so I must be making that up. Story 3. I had a 3rd grade student whose mother felt that I favored other students over her son. She would call me and yell at me about not treating him fairly and lying. She snuck past the office a few times to come into the classroom to watch me teach, which of course is illegal and I'd have to call the office. She'd tell me and the principal that she was trying to catch me in the act of being dishonest. Of course, my principal always defended me and dealt with the parent. As a final straw, the mother bought a watch with a voice recorder in it and the boy wore it to school. He yelled out in the middle of class suddenly, "I'm secretly recording you and you won't teach here for much longer." An 8-year-old, of course the watch was confiscated and the child was moved into a different classroom, though the school district could have legally moved him into another. But the mother still never backed down and the next teacher had similar issues. Story 4. My mom owned a daycare center and I worked there when I wasn't in school. There were some very unique kids and some crazy-ass parents. The one that comes mind, though, had a 6-year-old son. This kid was an incredible, but as soon as you met his parents, you understood why. He had just started school and was coming home upset because kids were making fun of him because of his pacifier that he kept with him and used throughout the day. So his mom decided to wait with him at the school bus stop and pick him up from there. One day they were waiting and he mentioned he had a wedgie. So right there at the bus stop, in front of all the kids, in his class, and the crossing guard, his mom picked it for him, just stuck her hand down his pants and took care of it for him. She wouldn't even let him handle his own wedgie. Needless to say, that did not help with his teasing. Story 5. Less helicopter parent, more my child is innocent, and a scam. My mom was kicked out of work, temporarily, from her underprivileged school until this case was settled. A kindergartner had just gotten her ears pierced, and she took the earrings out in class because they hurt. The teacher sent her to the health secretary, my mom, and the little girl lost an earring somewhere along the way, cleaned the ears, and sent her back to class. Mother of the child sued my mom and filed a case with the school because I guess the earrings were solid gold and diamond. I guess that's what Claire's pierced with seems legit. Tried to accuse my mom of stealing the earring. No chance that a 6-year-old lost a tiny object. Of course, the woman did not win in this situation, and my mom got back to work. But it was a whole bunch of baloney, accusing the teachers and office employees at the school for a lost earring and injured earlobe. Story 6. Before uni started, we used to hold activities for first-year students. Nothing educational, but always good fun. Had a student show up with his mother, and she questioned everything we were doing and how it will relate to her son's studies. It didn't. We were very clear that it was all for building relationships and a bit of pre-study enjoyment. It was also a chance to meet older students and get an idea of uni life. She was having none of it. She wanted to speak with the head of department and file an official complaint about these activities. Clearly having fun was not part of an education. The second day she came again, and triumphantly said the dean is coming to talk to us. The dean did come, gave us a pep talk, and said how much he enjoyed this time of the year, chugged a beer, and told us to join him in the local pub later on. She was speechless and left in a huff, dragging her son by the hand. Neither showed up for the rest of the week. Story 7. Music teacher here. I had a heli mom of one of my guitar students sit in on him during his first lesson. She was sitting right by him, shoulder to shoulder. As I was talking about various things like how to hold the guitar and how to shape your hands and fingers around the neck, she would grab his hand and do it for him every single time, for everything. Time to strum some chords? Mom did that for him too. Can't get the fret hand to squeeze hard enough to make the strings ring? She pressed his fingers for him. He cried out at that, and that's when I stopped and told her she had to let him do it on his own. All I got for that was a sharp look and a fine then. He tried on his own, and the string just made kind of a thud noise, and she said, "See, he needs me to help him." I told her that the only way he was going to be able to do it was to try and do it on his own. He was the one who had to build up the strength. Things didn't really progress much after that, and I ended the lesson. With all of that, I wasn't thinking they'd be sticking around for a second week, but back they came. Second lesson started off the same, and I politely told her she'd have to give him space in order to try. Still, she wasn't thrilled, but relented and got up in a huff and went out into the hall to watch from there. After she left, this kid took a deep breath and was visibly more relaxed. After she stepped out, he was able to have his own space, and he actually try on his own. He started to do better. It was awesome. At the end of the lesson, he said he couldn't wait to come back, and his mom came in and grilled him with something like, "Why can't you do that when I'm helping you? You don't want my help. You don't need my help." I could understand stuff like this if he was a young kid, 7 or younger. But dude's 14 years old. He's going to be a freshman in the fall. This poor kid has ended up being one of my best students. His mom still hovers, and he's still a super weird and socially awkward dude from living in a bubble. But he's finally found something he can be good at independently from his mom. It's really rewarding to see him gaining more and more confidence. Even if it is slowly, he'll get there someday. Story 8. Work at a summer camp, and we told scary stories. One of the boys in the camp couldn't sleep for the whole week because of some of the stories, so his mom demanded the scary stories be banned, otherwise she would basically badmouth our programs. The next Monday, the boy complained to me that we couldn't tell scary stories anymore and was upset about it. Tell that to your ducking mom. Story 9. An incredibly quiet student just flat out refused to engage in any discussion in class. She was an extremely pleasant girl. She just wouldn't speak. I brought it up with her mother during an interview, and she told me she'd forbidden her daughter to express her opinion and to just listen to the teacher out of fear they wouldn't agree with her opinion and mark her down out of bias. I assured her that expressing an opinion wouldn't get a student marked down in my class, and that developing one is important to her learning, but she just said, "I'd rather she didn't." Story 10. Criminal defense lawyer here. I was talking to my 23-year-old client in the hallway before court. His mom walked up to me and said forcefully, "He is a child. Do you understand me? A child," because she was upset that he was in trouble with the law. Story 11. I wasn't a teacher, but I did have a brief stint as a cheerleading coach. Kid gives an attitude about doing literally anything, won't follow any instruction, and usually either sasses me or sits on her phone. Additionally, kid skips practice to snort Xanax and put it on her Snapchat. Okay, I told her that if she wasn't interested in participating, she can sit in the stands Friday night instead. Kid proceeds to go to bathroom and calls mother. It's not like I can actually take away their phones. Try dealing with parents on that. Mother drives from work 30 minutes to scream at me for almost an hour. Apparently, it is my fault. Her child is the best on the team, and I am clearly targeting her. She says I have destroyed her confidence and am jealous of her talent. She can do whatever she wants if she's the best on the squad. Okay, lady. I stopped coaching after that year. Story 12. Okay, 2 great stories. Happened in 2006. A parent who volunteered in her child's classroom just to video tap her child all day, every day. She threatened to sue if we did not allow her to. She did this all through elementary. It ended in middle school when they told her no. She stood outside the fence and videotaped him at PE. Someone saw this and called the police. She pulled her kid and homeschooled him. Second, happened to a brother and sister I went to high school with. The son was socially awkward, tall, and a little round. He was in high school for only a year by himself, but his mom was present at every band function we had. She even tried to come to every practice, even the ones from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. But then she decided that her 7th grade daughter was going to skip the 8th grade so she could enter high school early. Now she had 2 kids. She was always at school, even stopping by to lunch with them. It was so sad. The kids were miserable. Then she had her daughter slip the 11th grade. Literally appealing to the school board, threatening legal action if they held back her child from her destiny. So now she has both kids in the same grade. They graduate together. Mom enrolls them in community college together in the same classes with her. So she is now going to classes with them. She never actually passes the classes, but she wants to be with them so that the professors know she is watching. Since she is a student, there are no grounds for having her removed. The kids get ready to transfer to the local university. They are done with mom. She tries to sit in on classes, but that is a big no from day one. They diverge in interests, so they get their own majors. Then they go nuts with classes, appealing to admin to take a huge load of credits. They are in school all day, every day they can. How I met up with them again was weird. I was working on campus and closed the library one night. I found them bedding down for the night in their old station wagon in the parking lot. I offered to let them stay overnight with me. They came to my house and told the tale. Last I heard, the daughter dropped out and went into the medical field. Story 13. I'm a nanny on the Upper East Side of New York, and while my boss is a good non-helicopter father, I routinely have play dates with other kids. I have a 4, 8, and 13-year-old, so I've seen it all. My two favorites, though. A mother of one of my girl's little friends called my boss up furious and insisting he fire me because I let her child play with sidewalk paint. She was mad I made her 7-year-old use a paintbrush instead of doing the drawing for him after he told me what he wants. He could have poked his eye out with a brush, according to her, and it was irresponsible. The saddest part was that little boy told me before he left how fun it was we made the paints ourselves, and then got to use them. My 13-year-old had a sleepover, and I got a 4-page list of things one girl wasn't allowed to do or eat. When I asked her about it, she told me she was only allergic to hazelnuts, and everything on the list was there because her mom didn't want her getting fat. I let her eat with the girls. We had build-your-own nacho quesadilla thing, and I took them to our bodega that is legitimately less than 250 feet away. It's the bottom level of an apartment building on our corner, and we're not even in the middle of the block, and got candy and soda to watch movies around 10 after they begged me to do so. And her mother informed my boss 2 days later her kid was no longer allowed to be friends with his daughter, and it was my fault, as it was irresponsible for me to let 4 girls leave the house after dark, with a chaperone or not. I also have a great one about my 4-year-old's team hockey mom threatening to call CPS on me so she could get my boss's attention, but that's less helicopter parenting and more pathetic. Story 14. I'll give 2 examples. One suburban, one inner city. Suburban. Kid asked where dogs came from. Not sure why, I was an English teacher. I said they were bred from wolves and gave 2 common explanations for how human interaction may have started. Mom called the school, then called me, freaking out that I mentioned evolution, turned into a whole thing. Inner city, teen sucker punched some poor girl, then punched me in the face when I broke them up. Ended up getting escorted off by campus cop. Dad, who was obviously a crackhead, showed up to the school and started threatening to kick everyone's ass. Story 15. Had a pretty typical red/yellow/green behavior chart. One child was just transferred to me, not a completely terrible kid, but had a habit of not know where the line was, so it got him in trouble from time to time. Every time I flipped his card to a yellow or red, would always let the parent know what happened and what we're going to do to stop your behavior in future. She then goes off on how it's the other little kid causing the problems and her child is perfect. I let her know that while there isn't a perfect person in the scenario, both kids could have acted in a different way. She then stated, and I'm not kidding, I know that the other kid is a dirty foster child. Still to this day don't know how she learned this. And he assaulted my child. Foster child pushed back after kidding hit by her child. She did this in front of the other child. I told her to meet me in the office. Had a meeting with the director, and she was no longer allowed in my classroom. However, had to take down my behavior chart, which kind of blew because of how well it was working. Story 16. I had a student who was failing pretty badly. He had a pretty bad attitude and was extremely disrespectful. When I called his father, the response was, "You're a woman. He doesn't need to respect you." I handed the phone to a male mentor teacher, pretty dumbfounded, and explained the situation. The male teacher proceeded to ream the dad out and then had the kid transferred from my class to his class. The kid still failed and was still a disrespectful ass. Not sure what the dad had to say about that, but at least he couldn't blame it on me being a woman. Story 17. I once took a babysitting job when I was 17 to earn some extra cash. The 9-year-old child wanted to play soccer inside. I told him many times not to do it and even took the ball away. He had another one and kicked the ball all around the house, completely ignoring me. He broke a lamp, some picture frames after knocking down a shelf and a window. When the parents came home, they blamed me for the damages and thought I was screwing around in the house. Why? Because the kid said I was doing that, never took another babysitting job after that. Edit. The breaking things part happens in a span of 1 minute, so there wasn't much I could do, especially since he would basically just play keep away with me. Story 18. Not a teacher or child caretaker, but I remember when I was in 8th grade, this little kid, about 3rd or 4th grade, was really weird and hung around us while we skateboarded. One day, he decided to come up after I fell and just hump me. I was obviously mad and told him to go away, and he didn't. Well, I fell another time, and he humped me again. I was livid. I told him if he doesn't go away, I'll tell his parents. Then he just walked up to me while I was sitting on the bench and humped me again. I told him I'm going to tell your parents, and he bolts inside his house, closing everything. All the guys and I were with were fed up too, so I decided to go to walk to his house and knock on his door. No one answered for about a minute. Then both his mom and dad was a cop, come out. I told them what he did. Well, his mom completely ignores what I say, and then explains, well, he said you punched him multiple times. Mind you, I did not punch this kid, but I did push him off twice when I fell, and pushed him away from me when I was on the bench. Not one of the times did he fall or stumble, I just gave a simple push. She continues to berate me, saying I'm a child beater, and then the dad chimes in and says he should arrest me. Well, of course, I start crying because I'm scared. I again reiterated that I never hit him. I simply pushed him because of his unacceptable behavior. Then they tell me how he has ADHD and was just acting out. I say, well, I was diagnosed with ADD a couple years ago, and it's never made me doing anything like what he did. Then the dad screams, if you don't get off my lawn, I'm going to arrest you, and starts walking towards his cop car. All of us run away as fast as we can, and I run home. Well, after a while, my dad gets home, and I tell him all of this. So he calls his buddy, who's the guy's superior, and tells him what happens. Apparently, the dad was going to get a promotion, but they just kept him as is. He got suspended from the police force for a couple weeks and got kicked off the neighborhood board members committee. They suspended him on unlawful use of power or something like that. He came up to my house and personally apologized. Put his house up for sale, but took it off because it never sold. They're still there, and the kid is still as ducked up today. Story 19. While I was student teaching, I had a student, and his mom was the art teacher. The student was a straight-up douche. Would cheat on any assignment, belittle classmates, etc. Anytime the student got in trouble or called out, he would run to his mom, the art teacher, and she would fight for him. All the teachers in the schools were afraid of her since she has been in the district for a long time and was thought to do no wrong by the administration. The student ended up plagiarizing an essay in class. I gave the student a 0, as it was stated in the assignment sheet that all plagiarism would be an automatic 0, and all hell broke loose. Meetings with the principal were set up. Mom would come in during my plan period and rip my ass for failing her kid, and the student would come fake crying to class the work. The essay was a large portion of the grade and would mean he would fail the class. After about 2 weeks of the mom coming in, I finally told her if he turned a new essay into me by the end of week, he could get 50% credit on it, would move his grade to a D if he got a 100%. The student comes waltzing into class on Friday and hands me his essay. After quickly scanning the essay, it just seemed off. After a quick Google search, the student took the entire Wikipedia page and copied it for his essay. After school, I went down to the art room to talk to the mom. I still remember the conversation like it was yesterday. Me. Matthew did a great job on his essay. Mom. Great! He was locked up in his room all week working on it. Me. When I looked at his paper, I did notice there was an odd section, though. Mom. What do you mean? Me. This section has a superscript number on it, and I don't see where he cited it. Mom. That is odd. I'll ask him about it. Me. Pulls out the printed Wikipedia page over his topic that is word for word. Here is the Wikipedia page over his topic if you want to look at. Mom. Scanning over both, and her face turns ghost white. Will he be able to make this up? Me. With a look of disbelief on my face. Hell no. The student ended up getting suspended, and Mom tried to fight the suspension. She even went as far to look into the legitimacy of the grade since a student teacher taught the course. All in all, the mom is no longer a teacher in the district, and the kid is in jail for selling drugs. The rest of the staff loved me for standing up to her and her so. Story 20. First grade, my second or third year, I had a kid whose mother was my first legit, extreme helicopter mom. She would walk him into the classroom every morning and put his backpack and folder away for him, and then sit at his table with him. And he would cry and cry for her not to leave. The crying is normal at the beginning of the year, but at this age, they don't cry for very long once the parent is left. After about 5 minutes, he would be fine, but she would take 20 minutes to leave because she didn't want to leave him like that. I asked her a few times to let him get his things ready by himself, but I was young, and this kid was a surprise kid, had brother and sisters with kids of their own, and parents were older. She didn't give a flying Schmidt what I would say. That's when I started rationalizing with the kid. Much easier. Do you see how all of your friends put their own backpacks and folders away every day? You're a big boy too. You don't need you mommy to do that for you, do you? Worked like a charm. After the second week, I started physically blocking her at the classroom door. I'm a big girl. Have them say their goodbyes, and have him go in the room by himself. The first time this had happened, he snatched the backpack from her and said, I can do it. I'm a big boy. She was pissed. One morning during the third or fourth week, I had a meeting, and it wasn't over before school started. The person covering my class didn't know to block her, and she let crazy mom in. When I came back, the kid was crying his eyes out, chasing his mom around the classroom, and she was smiling and giggling about his fit that she caused. Around deck, mom had told the kid that he was going to be homeschooled and wouldn't go back to our school. When she dropped him off the next day, he cried, and we could not console the poor kid. She left him at the door and smiled at me because he was so upset when she left. After a few hours, he had finally calmed down enough to tell us the problem. My mom said I was going to go to school at home and I wouldn't have to come here today, but she lied. She told him she was going to homeschool him so that he would cry when she left him at public school. WTF? He had one friend in the class, super sweet boy who would play with anyone. The crazy mom kid would punch other kids if they got in the swing next to his friend. No one else was allowed to swing next to him. Crazy mom called me and asked if I could just let them two play inside alone so her kid could have him all to himself. Not in those exact words, but that's what she was asking. Nope, not an option. Cut to April and we had a zoo field trip. Our whole class had our lunches in a cooler that was in the bus in the zoo parking lot, except his and his mom's. She insisted that she carry theirs and she doesn't want them in the cooler. Whatever. We had a meeting time in place for lunch because parent chaperones took small groups of kids around. We didn't stay in one big group. Had to wait about 10 minutes for a very nice dad to fetch the cooler with the lunches. Perfect. Waited on the stragglers and let kids use restroom and wash hands while waiting. During this time, Kid comes up to me and asks if I have a knife to peel his apple. Yeah, I always bring a knife to the zoo. No, the kind of knife you need to peel an apple isn't allowed in the zoo. Just eat it with the peel on. You'll be fine. He walks away. Lunches get to us, and I make sure everyone is eating and accounted for. Come to Crazy Mom, who is peeling her kid's apple with her car key. What? When she saw me walking up, she said, "It's better to eat the peel separately. It's healthier," with that smile. I say, "I hope you sanitized the key before you started. Otherwise, it won't be healthy at all." Then I return the same smile. At this point, she hands the apple to the kid, and he said he didn't want it. She was flabbergasted. "Why not? I just spent 20 minutes peeling it for you." He said, "That's gross." You used a car key and walked away to play with his friends. There are more stories about this parent from other teachers as he moved through the school. She once snuck into the school to get a picture of him taking his first standardized test. This was literally against the law in TX, photographs during state testing. And they had to contact the testing officials and fill out tons of paperwork, and our school had to reschedule the testing dates. All because Crazy Mom wanted a picture of her baby taking his first test for his scrapbook. Didn't mean for this to be so long, sorry. That mom still pisses me off when I think about her and how she effed up her kid's life. Story 21. In kindergarten, we have testing twice a year, one in winter and again in the spring. A parent called in a conference because her daughter had received 2% under the cutoff that suggested her child may, by third grade, need additional help meeting reading goals. Now, that isn't why I consider her a helicopter parent. Those test scores can be confusing, and I could see why she might have been worried upon seeing that if she didn't really understand the way it worked. However, myself and my mentor teacher spent about 45 minutes with her kid in the room hearing everything, trying to console her that her daughter was doing fine and that we weren't concerned about her progress at all. We told her she interacts well with her peers, feels confident and comfortable reading, and that these tests aren't a good way to showcase understanding, especially for a 5-year-old. The mother revealed that she makes her daughter do over 30 minutes of homework every night and won't even let her walk downstairs without reciting all of her weekly spelling words. Other stuff too, but basically the mom was putting unreasonable pressure on this 5-year-old girl, like planning college and thinking years ahead. Just relax, your kid is 5. If we have any concerns, trust me, you would know. Don't burn your kid out this early in their education. Story 22. I taught middle school for 1 year. We had a student who was being disruptive in all the classes. He was refusing to turn in work or even do it. He was constantly causing trouble. We had each tried several strategies to deal with the behavior in our own time. We had each talked to the parents numerous times, but they never did anything nor believed that the student was doing anything inappropriate. No one was having any success. Eventually, one of the teachers had enough, so he suggested we do a meeting between all of the student's teachers, the guidance counselor, a vice principal, the student, and his parents. There are 6 teachers plus the vice principal and the guidance counselor all saying the same basic version of student needs to pay attention, needs to do the work, needs to stop distracting other students, needs to be respectful, etc., etc. The mother disbelieves us. It's not the student's fault. We all have it in for the student. Nothing changed. Teaching sucks. Story 23. I once had a parent tell me the reason his son told the band director, "I don't have to listen to you because you band director was a young gay male, fresh out of college, was because he was recently diagnosed with ADHD. When I responded that I had been diagnosed with ADHD as a child and still struggled with it, but it had never once caused me to tell anyone else that they sucked, he became belligerent and started threatening me. Pretty sure the kid is in jail now. Story 24. A parent at my school worked for the district, but in a different department. Her daughter was really average. Not an A student, but not failing. There was no way this kid was a top performer in any way, but probably had a solid college career ahead of her. Well, that wasn't good enough for mom, and she wanted the kid to be valedictorian or nothing else. So she read the entire handbook on school accommodations and learning disabilities and began petitioning. She managed to get her kid labeled as needing accommodations and then helicoptered the teacher to make sure they were being met. If the kid got lower than an A, she would find something that the teacher didn't do and bring it up with admin. It became such a problem that the teacher was receiving emails almost 2x per day, and the admin was getting multiple calls per day. The teacher had to hire a lawyer and file a lawsuit for harassment with the union. The mom countersued, of course, and things got heated for a while. I remember the superintendent even getting involved. Every person in admin knew she was full of schmidt and making it up. No one could call her out because she was crazy, had money, and was ready to sue. They managed to somehow settle with her, basically waited out until summer. The only consequence she faced was related to emails. Apparently, she was using her work email to harass the teacher. They started monitoring her computer use, and she was no longer allowed to communicate with the teacher in question. Crazy Mom read the handbook on school policy, harassed the teacher for any supposed misstep. It got so bad, lawyers got involved. Story 25. Teacher here. We had a student, 5th grade, who was pretty sneaky at first. He acted innocent, but he was far from it. I'll jump to the end. He stepped on someone when they were laying down during free reading time. He would constantly talk and prevent the class from getting to lunch and specials on time, and did this just to cause trouble. He hit someone with a meter stick. He would accidentally kick people. He stole stuff. He cursed. Mom came out and said we were singling him out, and he would never do those things, and told us to stop contacting her. Later, he did something else, something like ripping up classroom decorations or something like that, and the principal saw it. Principal called Mom. Instead of accepting her child does wrong, she pulled him out of school. Since he hadn't been doing his work, this kid that was actually quite smart had all F's as transfer grades. Story 26. I had posted this some time ago. When I was 21, I was still living with my parents. Our neighbors were just the worst kind of parents. They let their kids bully other children and harass people's pets. One time, the kids were bullying the puppies of a stray dog that lived in our neighborhood, pulling their tails, twisting their ears, etc. Predictably and understandably, the mama dog growled and snapped at them. Some of the other neighbors tries to tell them that they shouldn't abuse animals. One day, they came to our place for dinner. I couldn't stand this family, so I decided to eat in my room. Then suddenly, I heard our puppy let out a painful yelp. Turns out the girl had kicked him. I ran downstairs immediately and picked him up. Their parents just smiled and said, "Oh, the kids were just playing with your pup." I lost my temper and yelled at them to get out. They left grumbling about how rude I was being. However, in just a few days, the mom asked my stepmom, who is a teacher, to tutor her kids. Free of cost, of course. Story 27. I work in a kindy in China. We have about 35 kids in each class seated in 4 rows of 8 with a split down the middle facing the teacher. We move the children about once a month. Each child moves back 1 row and the back row gets to sit in the front row. One parent came in and told us that her child must always be seated in the front row. There's nothing wrong with the child's eyesight. She's just too special to be seated anywhere but the front row, I guess. The parent did not request this. She ordered us. Another time in primary, the headmaster came to talk to me. Aghast. We had one special group of children that was taught all in English for every subject. This is very expensive, and all the parents are pretty rich. One guy has 3 Porsches, a red, yellow, and blue one, and drives whatever color he feels like to school. He also has several Harley Davidsons. Anyway, this very rich mother was upset because the other rich kids didn't want to play with her daughter. Her daughter, having servants at home, tried to order the other kids around, and you can imagine how popular that made her. Story 28. Not a child care worker, but one of oldest friends suffered from this. It's been passed so many times around my parents' friend group, it isn't even funny. His mom basically did all of his homework through high school. He was a very bright kid, but had no motivation as his mom did everything for him. Once he went to college and moved out, it was apparent that he didn't have the life skills to succeed on his own. His parents desperately wanted him to pass in college and tried so hard. But he eventually failed and dropped out. From what I gather now, he still lives at his parents' house and tries to hold jobs his mother gets for him, but can never get into work on time and always gets fired. I feel super sorry for the guy, because he would have been a good dude in society if his parents didn't mess it all up. I think he might have some underlying signs of sicking, but he was never tested. Story 29. I work as a camp counselor for church camps. One girl I had in my cabin was an absolute. She would sass me, call girls in the cabin idiots, and tell them she was better than them because she was in gifted classes, and she would punch some of the boy campers. She koalaed my friend, who was a boys counselor, and ended up causing him to fall and bust his lip. When she was confronted about it, she just shrugged and said, "He's the one who fell. It's his fault." The final straw was when she got mad because I told her she couldn't go to the playground. We were literally eating lunch like, "Sit down and eat." So she huffed and shoved my little sister into a chair, screaming, "Get out of my way." My sister only cries when she's mad. I looked over to her, completely shocked, and as soon as I saw tears welling up in her eyes, I knew it was go time. I grabbed her, took her to my friend, and as he tried to calm her down, I ran after this. I told her she had to apologize, and she straight up went, "My mom says I never have to apologize because people should be paying attention to me. When I get mad, I blow up, etc." Honestly, I didn't hear her. I was seeing red because who the hell did this 10-year-old think she was hurting my sister? I ended up letting her get back to the cabin. She's crying and screaming at my older girls in the cabin now, and I got the camp director. He yelled at her, made her apologize, and told me to call her mom. Called the mom, and this lady seriously went, "She didn't seem to do anything wrong. Maybe that little girl should grow some thicker skin." Excuse me? My sister is super thick-skinned. Wow, sorry that's so long. I've never been so mad at a kid before in my life. I hope this doesn't end up in my cabin again. Story 30. I had a parent swear I was targeting son and that he was failing my class because I was refusing to allow him his modifications. He was severely dysgraphic. That's a very serious accusation and can result in sanctions against your teaching license and federal lawsuits. To prove that I was following his plan and that he simply wasn't doing his work, I started sending him to the special education lab, which allows kids with modifications and accommodations to have a quiet place to work and a smaller teacher-to-student ratio. He immediately decides to cheat on his work, so his grades will go up and it will look like I was the problem. But the teachers in the lab caught it and documented it for me. The mom insisted that he just felt pressured to perform, which he may have. but it wasn't coming from me. The mom and I clashed the rest of the year. The next year, one of my students who had been in the class brought me a newspaper article where the kid had been arrested for drug possession and told me he was in rehab. Overall, the kid was a terribly behaved turd, but I still felt bad for him because he had to go home to his mom. Story 31. Not a teacher, but I used to nanny for a pretty affluent lady down the street during the summer holidays in high school. Took legitimate childcare classes before starting, multiple younger siblings of my own, leader of a local youth group, etc. I felt prepared, was getting the kid up and running in the morning, pick up after preschool, preparing lunch dinner, crafts, planning activities up until bedtime, and putting the kid to sleep. The little girl was about 3. I had my own key to the house, and on most days I didn't see the mom until about 20 minutes after her child went to sleep. Kid was a temper tantrums over every single instance that didn't go exactly her way, screeching hissy fits and tears all day long. Kid would purposely drop cereal on the ground and refuse to pick it up because that is what the housekeeper is for. Personal cell phone at 3. As a direct line so her dad could call her whenever he felt like it. Randomly telling cashiers at the store that they were poor. Endless demands for gifts and candy. Never really had food that wasn't takeout before we started cooking together. No discipline whatsoever. The kicker here? Whenever the tears didn't immediately work, little girl would snottily announce, "If you don't do what I say, then I will feel ill," and then would make herself throw up on purpose through sheer power of will and demand that you caught the puke with your hands. Her mom did exactly that. I didn't. Made it through 3 years of that before I went off to university. Simply because the mom paid so incredibly well, and because no one else was willing to go babysit there. In the end, the kid liked me a lot, mostly because I didn't put up with her schmidt and because I took her out for activities outdoors, walks with my dog when she actually behaved. Last I heard, the kid's grandma moved in with them so she could accompany their little Veruca Salt to school every day. Her mom still thinks that her kid is special and smart for being demanding. Story 32. Kid never did any work in class. Was caught trying to cheat numerous times, and overall was a disruption. I never liked to just give a kid a 0, so I'd given him numerous opportunities to make up work and redo the stuff he cheated on. Rarely took advantage of it and was missing a lot of work. One day I got an email from his mother asking why his grade was so low, and as to why I was lacking off on putting his work into my grade book. Overall, the email was probably 6 paragraphs long, berating me. I was a student teacher at the time, so I knew nothing. The work she was referring to was stuff he had turned in about 2 hours before this email came to me. Everything got turned into our school website in this class, so it was all digital. Needless to say, I quickly figured out the kid beast his work, told his mom it was all my fault that his grade was so low because I wasn't doing my job, and overall I should feel ashamed for putting him in that position. I sent her a nice reply, pointing out the timestamps on the assignment, showing he'd only recently sent the stuff in and that I normally try to get everything in about 24 hours after it gets submitted, but that it may be a little longer when assignments are turned in late. Mother never replied back after realizing her son had lied to her about basically everything. Story 33. Sometime in 2012, I distinctly remember it happening not long after Sandy Hook. A 4th grader I worked with was taking apart a highlighter at the sink and overflowing a cup. I asked him what his intention was, and he said, "I'm going to poison a girl I don't like with highlighter juice." I asked why he would do that, and he said, "I really hate her." I told my dunce of a superior about this, and she said, "Oh, he's just being dramatic," and blew me off. I told her if she did not escalate this, I'm going over her head, and she said fine. When his mom came to pick him up, we explained what happened, and she looked at him like, "Oh my, did you really do this?" In a way like she's never heard him do anything close to this. This was not the first time we've had issues with this kid that involved telling his parents, but she just sounded so surprised this time. The next afternoon, I could hear the kid from across the room telling his friends under his breath how he hated me for reporting this. The kid frickin' openly admitted he wanted to poison someone, and the cup in the sink was full of yellow water. For the rest of the week, when he got picked up by mom, she asked him how his day went, and he gave her the puppy dog eye treatment, as if plotting to injure someone didn't happen a few days earlier. She was so whipped. Parenting is awful these days, I swear. I'm no longer in the field. Story 34. Preschool teacher here, but one that comes to mind is this one particular one. We told this mom for years her son needed to be seen by a doctor for his behavior, but she rug-swept and denied and blamed. We went around in circles with her from the day he began at 2 years old until he went to kindergarten. Actually, we still do now, and he's in 1st grade and in our after-school program. These are actual quotes that flew out of mom's mouth as soon as we told her son's behavior for that day. Well, he had 2 servings of fruit last night with dinner when she was told he had an awful day and could not keep his hands to himself nor listen to directions. This is my favorite excuse of all time. He had a play date on Saturday. Those always rile him up when told about similar behavior. On a Tuesday. Well, he's been with his dad for 2 days. Now this one, dad did not mess around. This child listened to and respected dad much more than mom because he disciplined him. He held him accountable. Mom's interpretation of his behavior was his dad's fault, not her son flying off the handle in her care because he knew he'd get away with it, unlike at dad's. Well, when he's with that child, his behavior gets worse. No, it doesn't. Similarly, well, what did that child? any child do to him when told about altercations with other children. You see the point? Nothing was her son's fault. Nothing. And he knew that. When she told me he had been diagnosed with ADHD, I wasn't nearly as surprised as she thought I would be. He's now in our after-school program, and our driver overheard his first-grade teacher, oh, thank God, when she saw that van driver, was there to pick him up. Even his school teacher can't handle him in class, I've heard from the grapevine. He also had a younger sister who's been kicked out of another school and was well on her way to being kicked out of ours when I left. For her behavior also. She's only 3. Examples include peeing on a teacher when she didn't get her way, hitting and kicking other staff, etc. She is her brother, except worse in some ways. I have more stories about more children, and this child, if there's interest. Story 35. When I was a student teacher, I had a student when he was in 7th grade, and he was an absolute horror. Far more than the regular obnoxiousness common with that age. I mean, this kid didn't give and acted like he was invincible. He was mean, rude, and didn't listen to anything anyone had to say. From what the other teachers told me, he lived with his grandmother who was Native American, and anytime anyone at the school tried to talk to her about the issues they were having with him, she pulled out the race card and said that they were targeting her grandson because they were Native American, and not because her grandson was in fact a little asshole. She'd threatened to sue, and the school stopped bothering to call her. He knew he could get away with anything, and there was nothing they could do. I'm curious whatever happened to him. I wouldn't be surprised if he was in jail. Story 36. I emailed a parent to say their child was currently passing, but could technically fail the class if they did poorly on their final project and final exam. In the ensuing parent-teacher conference, I was told I was trying to fail the student and ruin his football scholarship. Edit, forgot I had another student. Same situation, different year. The parents wanted the principal to be present for the conference. So instead, all of the administration, the student's counselor, and myself were present. The dad tried getting into a shouting match with my principal, and he left crying because his little girl asterisk might asterisk fail. Edit 2. I went to history school instead of English school. Story 37. I taught middle school social studies, and we would watch Channel 1 News daily and write in our writing journals about what we saw and heard that stood out or was interesting. Then we would have brief 5 to 10 minutes discussions after and allow kids to read or respond. This was in 2013 to 15, when there were a lot of stories about gay marriage at the Supreme Court, transgender bathroom laws, Syria, protests, etc. Well, I was mentioned several times on the school's unofficial Facebook page that I had a gay agenda and that I was trying to teach students about the gay lifestyle. 2 parents banded together and got other parents whose kids were not even in my class to confront the school board. They did official investigation, and I was told to stay home for a few days. It all amounted to nothing after they interviewed the kids and clarified the situation and even read some of the journals. I basically got 2 days off with pay, but I did not like the scrutiny in a SS class, where teaching current events is important. Story 38. Oh man, I can finally say something on Reddit to contribute. I just finished my first year teaching in elementary education. We had a 4th grader who had an IEP, indicates special accommodations typically given to students with mental disability. And I personally saw syndrome in him and related a lot because my brother has the same mentality, impulsivity, and diagnosis. Well, this boy craved attention more than any teenage drama queen and did anything to get a rise out of students. Every class I had him, all 26 students would be distracted by what he is doing about every 2 minutes. I would walk him outside after an outburst, cause I knew yelling at him would cause overstimulation, and discuss what behavior he just exhibited and why it was wrong to do these things while we are learning together. He made it clear he understood and genuinely felt bad. We'd walk back in, and 10 seconds later, he's back at it. After the first day of talking to him outside of the class, his mom takes up arms, calling my principal and telling her that I am singling him out. We had a staff-wide meeting about how this specific parent was requiring the following procedures for handling her kid. No negative adjectives could be said to him about his behavior. We could not clip down PBIs used by the whole county. We couldn't speak with him alone in the hall or take him out of the class because we're singling him out. We can only praise his behavior. So I interviewed at a high school yesterday and got the job. Hell his mom for not addressing her child's mental health. My mom tried so hard to help my brother, and they've nurtured him for 35 years, and he still has major issues in life. I hope this child's mom gets an epiphany and get him the help he deserves. What the hell is parenting? Story 39. Preschool teacher here. A 4-year-old would bully/tease/punch/pull other kids' hair and curse up a storm. He was so challenging to the point where a lot of focus was on him, and the other kids were following his lead, and he took advantage of that hard. Nothing we said helped him change for the 2 years we had him. We gave him so many consequences, and while we did reward good behavior, he rarely ever was good. Parents would completely baby him. They acted like he was innocent, and his behavior was cute to them. They never took what we said seriously and think we exaggerate. He's going to kindergarten now, so good riddance. Story 40. A bit late. I had a camper that would constantly cause trouble and lie about it afterwards. He was a repeat camper, and we were warned before he was placed in our cabin. Since I was the junior counselor and this kid was apparently such a problem, I was assigned to pretty much watch him. It was 2 counselors to a cabin and roughly 13 kids in a cabin. So I literally had to watch only one kid, though he was old enough that I wasn't supposed to hover, just make sure that if issues arose, I saw what happened. Here are some of the things he did. Asterisk. First day, he tried to push a fellow camper off the top bunk. Second day, I caught him trying to steal additional candy from the snack cabin. Third day, he got kicked out of the pool for continuously drowning fellow campers. He got placed in my activity and again had to watch him, culminating on the 4th day when he Luis Suarez style bit another camper. I had to pick him up and lift him upside down to get him to let go of the kid. After that, I told the camp director I wasn't watching him and he wasn't allowed to be in my cabin. I guess none of the other items were bad enough to be sent home, but that one was, so he was promptly sent home and I was told I did a good job. Supposedly, the previous year, he had knocked over all the bunks in the cabin, breaking 4. 5, so a biting was considering pretty tame. Regardless, I've never had a kid like that before or since. The parents' responses to those above issues were, asterisk, he was likely just playing around. He probably didn't mean to try and push the camper off the bed. Asterisk, he probably was just getting a friend's snack for them. He was trying to steal them. Asterisk, kids horseplay in the pool all the time. This isn't anything serious. Asterisk, if he bit another kid, I'm sure he had a good reason for it. I didn't know how to react, so I pretty much didn't say anything and just helped load the kid's stuff into his parents' car. Story 41. I was working as a camp counselor for the summer, early mid-2000s. The only break we got was during swim time because the lifeguards took over watching the kids. But it was so hot half the time we all went swimming with the kids anyway. One little girl didn't pass her swim test. She cried and cried and cried. She wanted to swim in the deep end with her friends. She was so upset that we had to call her mom to come get her. The mom fought with the lifeguards and the counselors before getting the camp directors involved. She said that we were trying to bully her daughter and that her daughter had a right to swim where she wanted to, and we couldn't stop her from swimming in the deep end if she wanted to. We told her that it's a safety thing. The next day, she was failing at swimming in the deep end. We kicked her back to the shallow end. The girl said, "My mom said I don't have to listen to you. I can swim with my friends anywhere they are." She then went into the deep end again. They kicked her out again, put her in timeout from the pool. She somehow got back in. Then the lifeguards, having so many kids to watch, as is said, "Fine, if you're not going to listen, no one can swim until you listen." Made all the kids get out of the pool and sit on the edge. The kids were pissed. To be fair, I would be too if I was a child. The little girl was cried again because now we made everyone at camp hate her. Her mom came back again the next day, so angry, telling us we can't tell her daughter what to do. Her daughter can swim anywhere. Blah, blah. Over the next few days, the little girl continued to sneak into the deep end. I think the lifeguards got lazy at this point. Well, long story short, she almost drowned, ended up at the hospital, and the mom threatened to sue the camp for not keeping her daughter safe and changed her whole story about how she would never let her daughter do something so unsafe as swim in the deep end. I just know I never saw the little girl again after she was taken away. Story 42. A few years back, I worked in the baby room of a daycare. We had this new baby start that was a late-in-life baby for her mom. Mom was 43 to 45, and this was her first kid. She was the absolute worst. She would show up to breastfeed her daughter and stay for 3 hours just watching how we interacted with the babies, which wasn't too bad, except she was running a constant commentary of what we could be doing better for these babies. Myself and all the other workers had been working with babies for years, and this woman was telling us that all of our knowledge from our years of taking care of multiple babies was wrong, and the things she read out of some new age baby book were correct. For the most part, the first few months she was with us were all right. She was just annoying. But then her daughter started pulling up and trying to walk, as inevitably happens with all babies. One day she pulled up and fell and hit her head, getting a small knot on her forehead. As was the procedure after making sure that the baby was all right, I called her mom to let her know what had happened and that the baby was fine. She flipped her Schmidt, she screamed unintelligibly, and then hung up the phone. 10 minutes later, she stormed through the door, snatched her baby up, and went into the owner's office. I assumed that she was just gonna scream a bit and we would go on with our lives. Nope. Instead, a few minutes later, I'm called by into the office where this moron is demanding my job because if I had been watching her right, she wouldn't have been hurt. How could I not have been watching her baby? Boss told her to shove it and the baby was back on Monday. But still, story 43. I guess this is more helicopter aunting, but I think it still applies. I'm a college professor, so 99.9% of the time I never hear from my students' parents, and legally, thanks to FERPA laws, couldn't talk to them about their students even if I wanted to. Last year, during the final week of one of the summer bridge programs for incoming freshmen I teach in, I got an email from one of my students' aunt. She wrote me a 5-page long email. I copied it into Word because I was curious, detailing line by line and comment by comment why she disagreed with what I'd written on her niece's essay and the rationale I'd used to give it an F every single. One of my comments, on a 5-page essay, had a short paragraph devoted to picking apart the comment and rebutting it. At the end, she lambasted my teaching and suggested I'd failed the student out of spite. Totally untrue. The girl could barely string together a coherent sentence, let alone a grammatically correct one. When I told her I wasn't allowed to talk to her about her students' grades due to federal law, she called the program director and demanded I be fired. The fun twist at the end of this story, though, is that we ultimately figured out why she was so angry with my comments. Turns out she'd been writing her niece's essays all summer and had taken my comments personally. Needless to say, the niece was removed from the program. Story 44. I'm not sure if this counts as helicopter parenting, but I was working with 3 5-year-olds in an ESL program, and there was one 3-year-old that I could see the monster inside growing. I asked to speak to his mom, first time I've ever had to do that for a 3-year-old, and laid out what I saw happening in her son. I explained to her what would happen if she didn't start setting boundaries for him at home and giving him more structure. She basically told me to piss off because she had read some books. I had nearly a decade of young child learned experience at that point, and an advanced degree. But it didn't matter when compared to her books. Fast forward 2.5 years, and many incidents. Meetings later, and Mom was back in a meeting 8 months pregnant and bawling her eyes out because she was terrified of her son and how he'd react to a new baby at home. This is a kid who hit his best friend with a pencil because his friend reminded him of a rule. Not just that, the little monster had to get up from his table and walk a ways to get to the other kid to hit him. He finally got pulled from the program, and I can only hope that Mom finally pulled her head out of her ass long enough to get him the help he so desperately needs. Story 45. Caught 2 kids stealing candy from a teacher's room. Had it on security footage. They took stolen candy and stashed it in their locker. Searched locker, found backpack full of candy. Called parents in, showed them the video. That's not my kid on the video. Then we show them the backpack full of candy. Yeah, I bought them that candy. Story 46. I work in a creche, kids from age 0 to 3. And during the settling in period, one mother went to our employers to complain about a bunch of things. 1. The kids would play with water in the bathroom, even though the bathroom should only be used for washing your hands or going to the toilet. 2. The kids drink out of each other's cups, eat from each other's plates, and use their hands to eat, which was unacceptable for them. 3. Their child would be separated from the other children, which is why he has no friends. He is 6 years old. 4. Children in our group would cry too much because we are incapable of child caring. There have not been any consequences like disciplinary measures against us, because all of the above are a normal part of our daily work. 1. Water is a great element to encourage playful learning and anxiety-free contact with bathroom activities. 2. Kids learn eating, drinking, and sharing by doing these things on their own. 3. Separation happened several times in front of the patents because he hurt others. After a short time, he was always able to return. Also, kids do not have regular friends at that age. 4. I don't know if any of you have been around children, but they cry a lot, and most of the times nothing can be done about it. In the end, we just learned that these parents have no clue how children or our facility operate. They believe parenting just means to protect your child from everything and to make it happy all the time. They never learned that letting go and accepting negative feelings is a big part of the job too. Now, we try to explain everything we do. I guess these kinds of parents are often riddled with fear and guilt, maybe frustration over their own inability to satisfy their child. It's our job to show them that it's okay to ask for help. Heli Mom wants control but has none, complains a lot. Story 47. Not a teacher or anything, but back in middle school, I had a friend who had anger management issues, but we learned to adapt, and he's still a pretty cool kid. But one day, he had an outburst, and he got super mad and started throwing wood chips at everyone and swearing like no tomorrow. This was the first time he acted out, so it was pretty big drama for a week or two, and during that, my best friend was totally pissed at him, so I suggested her calling his parents and discussing with them. Apparently, the mom were saying stuff like, "Why would you just lie our faces like this?" And then, "Would you honestly believe Mikkel would do that?" We were both there when it happened. But the one that still makes my blood boil to this day was something along the lines of, if you keep lying to adults, you're going to end up in prison. And I have never met Mikkel's mom before that, but I just immediately despised her afterwards. Me and my friends were separately called to the guidance counselor, and I learned that people have taken advantage of him, and he has been bullied a lot, and we all apologized, and Mikkel admitted he didn't want his mom involved, but she forced herself into the situation. Still hate his mom, though. Story 48. Former teacher here. I used to teach a kid who was atrocious. Never listened, argued, combative, regularly picked up by the police, troubled background, and made life hell for pretty much everyone around him. He disadvantaged everyone he came in contact with in some way, and although aware of his impact, he had no remorse or consciousness as to the member he was being. He was extremely abusive to anyone with authority. Everyone from LSA to SLT knew what his future prospects were, and we did everything possible to help him. Yet parents gave no support. I thought him and was expected to get him to gain a grade of any degree when I knew full well he'd fail the exams and wouldn't keep exam conditions for those around him over an Easter break. I had a text from my LSA. The boy and a couple of his mates had stolen a car. been joyriding, and then chased by the police. He lost control of the car, hitting a solid brick wall. And as a result of this catastrophe, everyone died. It reached the local papers the next week. When we returned to school, everyone paid their respects, said how he was a troubled but wonderful, kind-hearted kid with his whole life ahead of him. His parents came in saying they'd done everything they could, that their child could do no wrong, and was a victim of the educational system. I couldn't show any emotion for him and spoke only with those who knew and taught him, the boy who was destroying his own chances and those around him. He may have needed support, but his actions to others were pure malice and hatred. His likely path would have been through gangs and crimes, and he was already breaking and entering, stealing cars, destroying other property, and regularly mugging others. Edit. Typos from my phone. Story 49. Colleague of mine was an English tutor for a small group of kids for a few months last year. It's free tutoring. State-funded. One student, girl 13 wires, never brought her books, never knew what her homework was or dates for tests and checkups. In addition, she never paid attention. No surprise, she didn't really improve. One day, the mother stormed into the classroom and demanded an explanation. The tutor told her to wait outside. Mother stayed. Afterwards, tutor explained and described the girl's behavior and organizational issues. The mother blamed the girl's regular teacher and the tutor. She then demanded from the tutor to contact the girl's English teacher every week to find out all dates, homeworks, etc., which the girl already gets 2 times in writing at that age. She also demanded that the teacher and the tutor should meet weekly and in their free time to discuss all issues. From a tutor that has lots of other students, CA 60, 80, a week, and is free. The requests were politely denied. Didn't stop her from waiting in front of the classroom every week to share her concerns and complain or insult the tutor. One day, the tutor was really in a hurry to catch a long-distance train and told the mother politely, "This was when I really had enough. I told my colleague to just go and let me handle it." I unpolitely told the mother to piss off and leave my colleague alone for good. During the moment of her perplexed silence, I gave her the number of my supervisor, my full name, and told her to call and complain about me and that I couldn't wait. To my surprise, she never called and never returned. Dr. Mother stalked my colleague, a free state-funded tutor, and blamed her for her daughter's failure. Wanted tutor and girl's teacher to spend several hours of their free time to help daughter organize her school stuff. Story 50. This was sad, and I kind of don't blame the woman. She brought her son in for a classroom tour because she was interested in our preschool. It was the middle of the summer, and her son was in a long-sleeve shirt, long pants, and a giant hat. She explained to us that her husband had died recently, and she is now extra careful with her son's sun exposure, since he has his father's red hair and fair complexion. She went through his sunscreen routine with us, explaining what direction to wipe the sunscreen, to make sure it's a thick layer so you can see where it's been applied, to reapply every 30 minutes. Do not miss his neck and make sure his collar on his shirt is always up. He only wears long sleeve shirts and long pants, and under no circumstances his hat comes off. I'm honestly surprised she didn't have him wearing gloves. We went outside to play, and he ran off with the other kids, and she went running behind him. He went to the top of the climber and was quickly told to get down. Sandbox was too dirty. The water table was out of the question. I eventually was able to get him to help water our vegetable garden and deadhead our flowers under Mom's watchful eye. After the tour was over, they left, and we never heard from them again. Our preschool was the best in the city, hard to get into, expensive, and the wait list is insane. She had a spot, and I have a feeling was too afraid to take it. My heart went out to that woman. After losing her husband, all she had was her son. Her hyperprotectiveness was clearly a reflex after being hit with her husband's death. I hope she's doing better. Story 51. My boyfriend and I are both teachers in China. 1. The parent demanded that my boyfriend show him all of the assignments and assessments for their child since the beginning of the year. This was in June. I'm assuming they intended to argue the marks for every assignment, despite not being a teacher and knowing nothing about the work. Obviously, teachers do not keep stacks of assignments on their desk for every student in every class for the whole damn year. Because of this fact, the parent screamed at the principal and forced a meeting so he could scream at my boyfriend. 2. I had a student in my level 2 ESL class who couldn't speak or understand a word of English. His assignments were all copied from somewhere, and on tests, he would just copy directly from other areas and never answer correctly. I found out during midterm exams that he had told one of my other students that she had better give him the answers for the test so he could pass. This explains how he got to level 2 to begin with. I explained this to my leader, who arranged a meeting with his mother. I explained that a student told me this. She said he would never cheat. I said I have proof from another student and several examples of copying. She said he only wants to pass so badly. I told her that's not a good reason to cheat. She didn't seem to see it as wrong. In the end, 0 consequences for the kid, and his mother seemed proud of him. Story 52. Me and my friend's dad were in the Scouts. One of their kids was the son of the neighborhood crazy family. He got a blister on a camping trip, complained and whined about needing to go to the hospital when he hardly needed a Band-Aid. He was one of those dramatic, I don't listen to anyone because and my parents don't discipline me at all kind of kids. Anyway, when the scouts get back, kid tells his parents and they get mad and said he should have gone to the hospital for a small blister, the kind anyone and everyone gets while hiking. The crazy parents invite our parents over to talk. Our parents go over to respectfully chat with them, and instead, crazy people go all out on them, screaming and yelling, and don't listen at all to what our dads have to say. They then threaten to call the cops on our dads. And that ends there from what I know. Another thing to mention, the mom would come over and complain for hours and hours about everyone else's kids to my mom, and it drove us insane. To be fair to the kid, his parents weren't the best influences, so most of it is just being raised to act that way. I don't hate him or anything. We're all just upset, disappointed with his parents. Story 53. I work daily with kids in outdoor programs. I screamed at a kid who was about to run into the road while a car was coming. The only time I ever scream like that is when a child's life is in danger. The child proceeded to have a meltdown because, as I later found out, he never gets disciplined and his parents never hold boundaries with him. His mother was there and comforted him. She wasn't mad at me, but she was saying, "Forest Ninja is sorry she yelled at you." And I was like, "No, I'm not." I stopped him from getting hit by a car. I've gotten to know this child over 2 years, and he is so disruptive and is never held accountable. It's pretty scary. Because I work in nature education, I meet a lot of parents experimenting with alternative parenting, and most methods do more harm than good. Be in charge. You're the adult. Story 54. Story 1, UK independent school, pound 30K a year. Parent. Teacher meeting about 6th form, 18 boys awful. E. Grade prediction from my class. He's done almost no work for 2 years. Never done any work worth more than a D. Regularly turns up to class with no books, paper, writing tools. No sign of any change in attitude. A real waste of time. Dad has been berating me for 10 minutes about how I'm ruining his son's chances at getting into university. I respond with what I've said already. Done no work, shocking effort and attitude. Nothing better than ADE, etc. Boy pipes up at this point. Your teaching doesn't inspire me to learn. I respond with a professional version of, grow up you child. It's your responsibility to complete the work set. Everyone else manages fine. Conversation goes round a few more times. I have to end the meeting to go teach. Dad tries to sum up with, well, I think we can agree there is fault on both sides. No, we don't agree. Story 2. Summer break from when I was at uni. I go do Camp America, camp counselor. 1 9-year-old kid is wild. Hitting kids, me running around the whole time. Absolutely no filter, just wild. Parents come along after 4 weeks. How's Jimmy doing? Me. He's okay. He can get very wild, though. Is that normal for him? Mom. Oh, okay. We wanted to see how he'd do without his medication. Story 55. The mom of a girl I went to college with had a fax line installed in her daughter's dorm room and made her send all of her homework assignments and papers to her for edits and approval before turning anything in. The girl is now a journalist at a prominent newspaper. I've always wondered if her mom is still ghostwriting. Story 56. I never met this parent, but her reputation alone is worth a mention on this thread. A little while ago, I taught English in Japan, and there was one mother who had 3 kids in our school. The oldest girl was a gem. She always worked really hard and cheerfully helped other students. She really had a passion for learning, but the twins, who were around 8, 9, were horrible. They never did homework, always goofed around in class, and they also never seemed to bathe. They would leave dirty handprints on previously clean papers and smelled just awful. On top of this, they consistently scored around 30 to 40% on tests and just didn't seem to care no matter what we did to motivate them. Now, I had little direct contact with the parents, but I thought this was something that their mother should know about. But when I mentioned my concerns to our Japanese coworkers, they adamantly told me I should never bring up any negative comments about these children to their mother. She gave the school a lot of money and was very proud of her children. We couldn't afford to tell her any bad news because she could directly influence our reputation in the area. I was even asked to change the scores on their tests and student reviews so that the mother would think they were doing well. The universal fear of this woman's wrath was remarkable. Story 57. Teacher of preschool. Have a 4-year-old student, let's call him Child A, who is developmentally above his peers. He is reading and doing basic math, not because parents pressure him, just naturally smart kid. Enter Child B, who is on track and slightly above average for his age. Child B is also very competitive, and his parents push him in this direction as well. Gotta be the best at everything. One day in class, I'm reading a book out loud. Child A begins to read the book out loud to the class with me. I let him read it and assist when he struggled. All the kids were excited for him, except Child B. Child B angrily states, I can read too. I reply, That's great. It is important to enjoy books and have them read to you so you can learn. Knowing he is not reading yet, but can recognize sight words. Fast forward a month or two. Child B again points out in class he can read now. So I have him read a beginning reader to me. He does better recognizing some words, but is not quite there yet. Find out from his nanny that his mom was so upset that Child A could read already and that her child wasn't, that she enrolled him in Kumon classes and he goes to tutoring 2X's a week. Remind you, he is 4 ISO and completely developmentally on track. She just wants him to be the smartest in his class when he goes to kindergarten in the fall. This poor kid is doomed. Sadly, he will snap one day. Story 58. I once worked as an au pair for a family, and a few days in, the mom had to go to work early, and so I was fixing the kids' breakfast. I asked the daughter what they normally had, and she said cereal, so I fixed it. The younger boy then comes down and throws the bowl on the ground and starts demanding ice cream. Now I assumed this was just a tantrum and didn't give him any, and instead managed to convince him into toast covered in Nutella, which seemed a bit better. When his mom got home, I told her what had happened, and she was shocked that I hadn't immediately caved and said in future, I should give him whatever he asks for. The rest of the time I stayed with this family, I never once saw this kid eat any fruit, vegetables, had ice cream for breakfast, and sometimes dinner if he was really playing up. The fact his parents never considered this, maybe should change, still shocks me. Story 59. A third grader was just relentlessly bullying this other girl. He was saying she was garbage and a monster and doing it loudly over and over, so the whole class heard. Finally, I'd had enough and told him I was going to call the office. He said to me, "If you call the office, I'm going to hit you." I call. They tell me to send him down, and he says, no. He says, if I hear them call my name over the announcements, I'm going to hit her too, because she deserves it, and it'll be your fault. Well, they call his name over announcements when they realize he isn't going to be coming down. He destroys my classroom, and the principal eventually came up and dragged him out. He got suspended, and mom calls the office demanding a meeting with me. She said, I want to know what that art teacher did to provoke him to say that. She also demanded the music and gym teachers be there for some reason, both principals and his classroom teacher. She didn't even show up to the meeting, but she still sent her son to school each day he was supposed to be suspended. Story 60. I didn't answer a phone call from my parents in college, and they called security at 7 a.m. on a Saturday to knock on my dorm room, to wake me up and call them. Talked to all my high school teachers prior to the first day of school to get extra books, so I didn't have to carry anything home. Wrote a handwritten letter to me asking me not to go to my BF house during the week because the road was too dangerous. I was 23. Wrote my high school papers for me. Story 61. I quit teaching high-functioning special education when I taught my middle school kids how to dial 911 and work with an operator for assistance, and got criticism from 5/6 parents for traumatizing their children. The irony? One of the parents had choked about a year before and needed assistance, but my student was terrified, didn't know what to do, and ran away. The woman had passed out on the lawn, and a neighbor responded. They had to send the police to help search for the student. It had frightened her that much. Story 62. In a gap year, I worked as a court registrar in youth criminal court, sitting at the bench beside a justice of the peace. It mostly meant I called names and did filing and signings on the spot for the JP. But I would have to keep order at times. 1. A 16-year-old girl kept talking during proceedings in our intake courtroom that was full to the brim. I called order twice, and the third time in my bossiest 21-year-old voice. Young lady in the blue shirt with black hair, quiet in the courtroom now. She mouthed back something to the effect of, "Don't tell me to blah, blah, blah," followed by me. "Bailiff, please escort this young woman outside until she can behave appropriately." Her mom jumped up with a, "How dare I? And she'll miss her name." "No, ma'am. We'll call her in." Wonder why the kid was up on assault charges. Story 63. It happens after childhood, too. I'm a professor at a college in NH. I once had a parent track down my personal email address and proceed to send me multiple emails regarding her son's grade in a Comp 1 class, arguing he is a brilliant writer. He was not. And he deserves an A. He did not. I explained that, aside from one writing exercise a few sentences long completed the first week, he didn't actually submit any work and hardly ever attended class. Unwavering and resolute, she argued. Well, that's precisely because he's such a talented writer and doesn't need such a useless class. I let her know I reached out to him regularly over the semester. However, students need to actually submit something. And at this point in our email exchange, she's submitted more than 10 times the writing to me than her son had for what was meant to be a writing-intensive class. I believe it was the next semester the student dropped out. I guess some writers and their moms are just too brilliant for writing. Story 64. I'm not sure it qualifies, but when I was a kid, around 10, I took violin lessons because I just loved this instrument for as long as I could remember, but to be honest, I wasn't really good at it. Often the teacher would teach to 2 students at the same time, and it would often be the same pair. My lesson buddy was this younger boy, around 7, 8 years old, who was so good at playing the violin, he was way ahead of me even though he was years younger than me. I knew his mother was strict, but one day the music school organized an event where students of all instruments would play for parents and locals. It was a fairly small village, along with some food served. Me and all other violin students played too. This boy played perfectly. Except one note, right after we all finished, his mother stormed out of the crowd towards him and slapped him hard in front of everyone, then proceeded to yell at him for doing one mistake. The boy started to cry and she dragged him away. It's been 15 years, but I'll never forget that. Story 65. Late, but here it goes. I work in a really interesting high school. The kind of school in a city where when we had a fire, we just shut down the third floor and kept teaching. Anyway, this kid, let's call him Greg, is standing in the hallway humping the corner of the wall. Naturally, I say, "Hey, Greg, can we get to class?" Greg continues what he is doing, turns, looks at me and says, "Yo, Mr. Gragtalk, this is what I'm going to do to your wife tonight." I asked him to repeat himself, thinking he couldn't be dumb enough to say it twice. He was. So we get his parent in and she denies everything. Can't be my Greg. He's an angel. Curses me out saying I'm just targeting her kid. Then we show her the school security feed. You can see very clearly Greg molesting the wall, turn and say something to me. Then me walk over confused and him say it again. She still insisted that he was provoked. Story 66. At my school, one of our teachers suspected that one of her kids had a learning disability and wanted to bring in a psychologist to meet with the child in order to do an evaluation. She scheduled a meeting with the parents. The parents said that the teacher was wrong, pulled their child out of the school that week, and put the child somewhere else. I imagine the parents thought that by not treating the child's problem would magically go away. That's not how it works. In this case, part of the reason the teacher suspected this learning disability is because she had already designed activities that allowed the child to overcome her disability. All the parents managed to do is put the child into the classroom of an unsuspecting teacher who would have to start all the way back at square one. Story 67. I used to be a lifeguard during the summer breaks of college. One of the pools I worked at had 2 water slides that landed in about 9 to 10 feet of water. Of course, kids would go on the slides even if they couldn't swim because it looked fun. So one day, this kid goes down the slide, realizes he can't swim, and starts to sink. I see this, blow my whistle and jump in. After I pull him out and make sure he's okay, I tell him that he isn't allowed to go down the slide anymore. About 10 minutes later, his mom comes up and starts yelling at me about how they paid to get in here and that her son should be able to do whatever he wants and that it is my job to save him. After a moment of disbelief and shock, I told her to leave and never come back. Story 68. Where to begin? I worked with a woman whose child was in my class. God help a child who looked cross-eyed at her kid. She then told me that her kids couldn't go play in their own backyard unsupervised, even though the yard was fenced and safe. Nope must 100% of the time be watching the kids. 5 and 8. A mom who made us report on the consistency and frequency of her child's bowel movements. A child assaulted me, and his mom told him, "It's okay, baby," and then demanded that we say something nice about her child. A mom would come in and spend 30, 45 minutes dropping off her son, all year amidst tears and her assurances that we weren't going to abuse him. That kid wasn't allowed to do anything on his own. Story 69. HR manager here. Had an employee who was written up. Their mom called me to tell me that it wasn't their fault. They were going through a lot, and that we needed to remove the write-up from their record. She even offered to come up and meet with me. This was an adult employee, and she was still helicopter parenting him. Story 70? Not a teacher or a child care worker, but my manager called in sick because her daughter scraped her knee. When she called in, I was thinking maybe she broke something or something serious. Turns out she was just playing with a friend of hers. She fell down, stood up, and continued playing. So her wife told her about it jokingly, but she took it seriously. Also, anyone who's a smoker or sick, coughing to clear your throat for her is considered sick, is not allowed anywhere. Her property, Story 71. I'll throw in the best case of helicopter parenting I've ever seen. And I mean, this is now. It should be done. The wife and I took her little ones to the park. They were 4 and 6, I think. There was a boy there, maybe 8 or 9, alone, with just him mom. They, the mom and son, were running around the play structure playing tag. She was leaping up the slide to chase him, swinging over bars, running over obstacles, and both laughing and having a flipping blast. My wife and I looked at each other and said we need to start playing with our kids like that. And I'll tell you what, it's a workout. Kudos to that mom of a single boy who rocked parenting that day. Story 72. Another kid beat up a much smaller kid for no reason other than they felt like it. Parents get called in, the father goes completely apeshmet and physically attacks the principal for lying about his perfect child. He ended up getting arrested and the school barred him from setting foot on the grounds. Story 73. I worked in a daycare for 6 years and about 2 years before I left. They hired a woman who had a school-age son that would be there from the time she got there to the time she left. He literally did not leave her side. He was 9 years old. She pulled him on her lap and held him like a baby. And if any other kid came near him, she'd hover to make sure that no one was saying anything mean to her little baby son. She even accused me of making him do push-ups and got me written up because the kids were having a push-up contest. She told the director I was punishing them. In the weirdest turn of events, it wasn't even her son. It was her grandson. Yikes, oh Rama. Story 74. I used to work daycare in a pre-K room. Little boy baby talked, wasn't close to potty trained, had no social skills, and threw temper tantrums where he would lay on the ground, kick, and fake cry. We called a conference with mom to talk about things because there was no way this poor guy was ready for kindergarten. Turns out mom baby talked to him, gave him whatever he wanted when he cried, and wasn't even trying to potty train him because he's my last baby and I want him to stay a baby. I wonder what happened to that kid a lot. His mom was setting him up for failure. Story 75. Childcare worker here. Lots of scary parenting. One mother won't let her child drink tap water. Another is convinced her child is retarded. Her words, because she's quiet and shy and keeps trying to get her tested for things. Another thinks her child is being severely disadvantaged because he doesn't know his times tables. He just turned 4. Another made a complaint to our company management because in a photo, it looked like his daughter was scribbling and not drawing properly. We have a severe peanut allergy in our room, and parents keep sneaking in peanut butter because their child isn't allergic. The worst is 4. 5-year-olds who can't even wipe because mommy and daddy told them it's the teacher's job. Story 76. I was waiting in line for food in a restaurant. This kid just skips to the front to order an ice cream. I politely said, "Hey buddy, we're all waiting in line to get some food if you want to join us." He turns around and flips the V sign and runs off to his mother to complain about me. I follow and explain the situation. She's all, "My kid has sick. He doesn't understand about queuing, so you're being very unreasonable." I respond that yes, he has autism, and sure, that explains why his behavior might be outside of the norm, but that doesn't give him carte blanche to be rude. We continue to argue all while her son is dancing behind her, swearing his arse off at me. Story 77. I'm way too late, so this will never go anywhere, but I had a student in my class and mom believed that the sun shone out of that girl's ass. She was 5 in my class and still had a pacifier. Mom cried when I said pacifiers were not allowed in my room. Mother's Day, we gave the moms a breakfast goodie bag with mini muffins and a bottle of water. Kid, don't eat that. I want it when I get home. Mom, okay, sweetie, but the best. Another teacher came across them in the grocery store. Apparently, kid throws a tantrum every time they go to the grocery store until mom gets her something to eat while she rides in the cart. Examples: tubs of icing, cans of whipped cream, and my favorite, bottles of Slash coffee creamer, Slash. Story 78. We get kids in pretty young as 4 months. We keep them until they are around 4 or 5, ready to start kindergarten. Being with the child 8+ hours a day, we can see some symptoms that we have been trained to notice. Tell the parent that maybe they should look into therapy for their mentally handicapped child. How dare you? My child is not crazy. We are simply trying to help. The earlier it is diagnosed, the easier it will be to handle in the future. Story 79. Had a student who had a support dog. Shy girl, soft-spoken. She started not coming to school and her grades began to suffer. English teacher calls her father, suggesting she comes to do makeup work Wednesdays and Fridays. Parent says, "I'll see if she feels like it." They were literally taking even the slightest sign of tiredness in the morning to mean that she didn't want to come to school. They insisted that we couldn't tell her she had to wait to use the restroom because that would cause her anxiety. Story 80. College professor here. I routinely have the parents of 18, 22-year-old adults email or call me regarding the grade their kid received in my class. Some make threats against my career, some cry, some plead with me to take mercy because their child is just misunderstood. Usually, that means their kid has just been smoking, skipping class, and getting drunk for 3 months straight and assumes they will still graduate because who would fail someone in their last semester? Nothing is more pathetic than being 22 and your mom calling a professor. I never respond to the emails. My time is better spent working with students that have a desire to learn. Story 81. Not a teacher, carer, but I once knew of a boy whose mother absolutely believed he was the pinnacle of the perfect child, when in fact he was out smashing bus shelters, slashing car tires, kicking bins over, and just generally being a mindless vandal. Even when he was caught in the act and arrested, his mother was insistent the police had got it wrong because he had told her he was going to play football with his friends, so couldn't have been him smashing shop windows at it. Spelling. Story 82. A mom claimed that her son's skin was being negatively affected by the facility's soap, so she brought his own organic soap for him to use. She also thought that he may have been allergic to multiple different things, and so we had to completely change our snacks to suit the kid. Months later, when asked about the allergies, she said, "Oh, I don't think he's allergic to lactose, gluten, XYZ dye after all." Story 83. According to one of my teacher friends, the worst one is a parent who comes to class every day with her son for no reason. She just sits there staring at the teacher and other students. The kid has no friends, no support, just his mother. She wouldn't let him go guidance counseling, so they never got a chance to discuss his future, college, work, etc. His mother never talked to him either. She just kind of sat at the table during lunch, monitoring everyone who walked by.